So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. Shortly, just a little of a hello while you have the time to get settled and find your seats. There's still some free in the front row if you like. Good. So, good afternoon and welcome to today's Masterclass. Our topic is maximizing ROI when risk meets resilience in unstable supply chains. So I know that it is the slot shortly. Can you hear me well, or is it like, okay, good. I know this is the slot shortly before coffee, so I really hope I'll get your attention for the next 30 minutes. Stay strong, and let's all appreciate that it's no longer 30 plus degrees like last weekend, or who was here 2 years ago in this room 2 years ago. So let's start with a little question to the audience in order for us to understand who of you. Is there feedback? Perfect, all good. Thanks. So let's start with a quick question of the audience so that we can well understand who of you is present and what kind of industries you're from, what are you doing. So I would like some interaction, so I will be asking you to lift your arms if you are part of the following category, and it's basically just a very simple question that's about your role. So let's start with who in this room, and I assume it's going to be a big number, is part of procurement. That makes a lot of sense at the procurement conference. So yeah, welcome. Very good to see you all here. The next one would be who of you is part of sustainability and ESG. Wonderful. Really nice to see you here as well. So the third one would be risk and compliance. Players that we definitely see much more in the last years when it comes to sustainable procurement as well, next to procurement and sustainability. So welcome. Really good to have you here. What about like strategy or C-level? All right, perfect. And if you haven't raised your hand yet, this is your moment to raise your hand if you are in the category other. Good, yes, we have some other. So this is what we expect, not the other, but like in the sense that we have some cross-collaboration. Because without cross-collaboration, we're not going to be able to to drive real value. And that's why I'm really happy to also see people from all sorts of areas today in the audience. And also really happy to see the audience being so filled and almost every chair taken. So thank you so much. We all know that procurement has taken center stage in recent years. And navigating from constant storms of disruptions. We have volatile markets, then we have geopolitical risk, also the politics going on right now, even in our country, and growing ESG demands and regulatory pressures. But in 2025, I think that some of the conversation is shifting. It's no longer just about risk avoidance or compliance, but I think the real question is, how do we turn responsible procurement into a source of competitive advantage that delivers measurable ROI and resilience in the long term? So that's why we're here and what we want to explore today. And I'm really happy that we're doing this not in theory, but through the lens of real operational leadership. And that's also why I couldn't be more excited to have Jurriaan Lombaers here. He's former Chief Procurement Officer of Air France KLM, and he has deep experiences in a hard-to-abate industry when it comes to balancing cost, ESG and sustainability, and carbon, and the complexity of all of the most challenging supply chain that he's facing. So with that, let's jump in. Jurriaan, ben je er klaar voor?
Ik ben er helemaal klaar voor.
Perfect. Oh, by the way, I hope it's okay for you. We were discussing what language we have in common, and we're both fluent in Dutch. So we thought you don't mind. Okay, so please don't stand up and leave. Just a little joke. We also speak English, so English it is. I really hope it's okay that we're today not doing it in German. Good. So let's start. Jurriaan, thank you so much for providing us today with the insights from a practical CPO experience and perspective. And you led procurement at one of the world's major airlines, a role that comes with enormous complexity, pressure, and opportunity. So yeah, happy to hear about you today.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for your great introduction. Thank you for all being here. Such a mixed and exciting audience together. And let's talk about airlines a bit. I mean, because it's a very turbulent industry. At Air France KLM, the team was measuring 17 billion euros of spend. But over the last years, I also said, together with that 17 billion euro spent, we actually have also responsibility to manage 32 million tons of CO2. And I think that's a lot. And the airline industry is quite at a defining moment in my view. So on the one hand, it continues to grow. Nobody expected that during COVID, but it's growing at 3 to 4% per year. Last year, it passed a major milestone. Anybody? 5 billion passengers in 2024. And at the same time, the whole industry knows it needs to decarbonize. Because today it's 2 or 3% of the global carbon footprint. But if all the other industries decarbonize and the airline industry continues to grow, will be 20% of global. And then I think there's a huge risk of losing our license to operate. And that in a context where there's a low margin. So every ticket we only earn on average $6. Maybe another fact that maybe people don't know, but there's only a few things you need to do wrong and you don't have any profit anymore.
That's really interesting. Great. So many companies face today the question whether they make their programs compliance-driven or focus on value creation. I'm curious to hear what the perspective is that Air France KLM has taken and what your role was as CPO.
Yeah, I mean, at Air France KLM, we believed that, of course, you need to comply with the law. Why wouldn't you? But we need to do more than that. We need to be a front runner in the industry. And some examples of that. KLM was the first airline in the world to fly on biokerosene, or in jargon, sustainable aviation fuel. In 2013, we started adopt as the first airline in the world supplier sustainability assessments. And when I stepped in the role in 2018, I think we had already a base in place of what sustainable procurement is, but I felt we needed to structure it a little bit more and segment it a little bit more. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Obviously, like many other companies, we also set ourselves a SBTi target. Our trajectory towards net zero, and I must say I'm really happy that many other airlines followed that path. But I think it's great to do that together as an industry, and again, I think it's badly needed.
Fantastic. So can you tell us a bit more about how you shaped your sustainable procurement agenda?
Yeah, I mean, you can see on the slide, the visual that I often used at the beginning, and they all ask me, yeah, but what do you really want? And I try to say, let's make it relatively simple. So that's where I made the pyramid, the sustainability pyramid, as I call it. And at the bottom of the pyramid, you do things that are more compliance-driven. And the higher you go in the pyramid, you do things that are much more value creation, much more about strategic risk management. And we do that segmentation because at Air France KLM, with our 17 billion euro spend, we also had 15,000 suppliers in 170 countries. So you cannot do at 15,000 suppliers all the things that maybe you want to do. So you need to pick and choose. So at the bottom of the pyramid, we had a supplier code of conduct that we put in place at each and every contract. I guess that makes sense. The next level that we did with less suppliers, but the more specific high-risk categories, we started to put in supplier assessments. And then at an higher level, we said over the recent years, but a large part of our carbon footprint is again in our supply base. So we need to get those carbon insights. That's where we started to roll out CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, to the largest hundreds of our suppliers. And last year we were contemplating about actually, as we have an SBTi target ourselves, to also make it mandatory for our most important suppliers, to give us the confidence that they also were committed to a net zero journey. It's an obvious thing, and the pyramid by itself is not rocket science, but getting it thoroughly implemented, getting it back to big KPI is a lot of work. But it certainly helped to get the message across in procurement, but also to my stakeholders in the business.
Nice. So summarizing, I hear that having a segmented program in place for sustainable procurement was really important, and that it helped you roll out the program across the entire organization.
Absolutely.
Nice. So, the next question I would like to ask you is, how do you get buy-in into your sustainable procurement program from the higher leadership? I mean, as a CPO, you're a leader, but from the ones above.
Yeah, no, I think that's a super important point. I think where each and everybody should start, and for me, it's really about explaining the why. So if you don't have the people on board with the why, so it was a lot about so that we have a massive carbon footprint, not only talking about spend, but carbon footprint, about the license to operate and to start to bring it to life, what we want to do, I think made people more at ease. So they felt, okay, this is something we can do step by step. It makes sense, and that's how we got the buy-in. And fast forward, we now have our Air France KLM CEO talking in his financial quarterly results about an update on sustainable aviation fuel. And already our uplift. He talks about the EcoVadis rating and other ratings. That gives me a lot of confidence. Say, okay, great, that's the support I need from my CEO, because if he talks about it, it's a lot easier for me to get the whole organization and our supply base with us.
Absolutely. Great. So to what extent do you think it is important to have ROI behind it?
I think it's fundamental to have sort of the benefits clear. That's sort of an integral part of formulating the why. If I think about an ROI, there's an R and there's an I. And if I think about the return, it's about the benefits. And traditionally, everybody thinks rightly so about the financial benefits. So maybe we go a little bit more in depth in a moment. But I would encourage everybody as well to think about, okay, but what are the non-financial benefits? Because I think they are equally important from a supply chain resilience perspective, from a strategic risk management. And then you need to compare that against the investment. So we not only have a procurement organization, we also need to invest in tools and programs to get adoption of certain tools and processes. So that's how I look to ROI. And if we double click a bit on the financial lens, one thing for me to make it sort of very practical was believing in a program to roll out a supplier assessment. I had a choice to say, okay, do I want to do that myself with a self-assessment, which is an option that you can do, or do you want to outsource it to an independent party? We chose for the latter, in the sense that for me that's more credible if somebody else judges the supplier results. But the benefit was also, I firmly believe, and I think that's a very conservative number, that probably saves 1 or 2% at least of the time of the buyers. And with an organization of 300 buyers or a total cost of 25 million euros, that already equates to probably up to €500,000. So, and I think that made it easier for me to justify to the executive leadership why we were doing these things. But it's not only about the bottom line. For me, it's also very much and more about the top line. So I think more and more people start to ask the question, okay, but how are you performing on your sustainability results? And it's not a 0 or 100 decision that they say if you're less sustainable, you don't get the business anymore. But it's one of those factors, year by year, it starts to play a more important role with our customers to say, okay, do we award you again more business? So I'm a firm believer that if you can demonstrate sustainability performance, it will help your top line. And maybe last example, if we still have a little bit of time.
Sure.
Like any large organization, we need to put these big financial transactions in the market, like bond transactions. These days you have what they call sustainability-linked bonds. So we go in the market and we try and get $500 million funding. Recently we did sustainability-linked bonds. And if we were demonstrating better sustainability performance, we would get access to lower basis point rates. Again, if you do that on $500 million, a few basis points, again, is a lot of money. So that's another way to think about financial benefits.
Yeah, that goes directly into the capital market. So is there anything you would like to still add on non-financial benefits, or should I jump to the next section?
No, I think the other thing which was important for me, I wanted to have, from the non-financial perspective, some assurance that my supply base was thinking about sustainability. And with these supplier assessments, you know, the first time they did it, they got a rating. But in a way, that rating was not so important for me because it was just a starting point, the baseline. What I was much more interested in is then on a year-on-year basis, do I see my supply base improving? Because that gave me assurance that we're taking it serious, that they had the right awareness, that they were prioritizing it. And we had one example where we had the US caterer also having some labor issues, and that got to the point that I was getting started about some supply chain disruption. So there really starts to hurt you. I'm sure if you take a flight and your catering meal is not there, you're not going to be very happy. And then it certainly starts to become a real, business impact. So that's not directly financial impact, but still very important.
Yeah. And seeing that improvement in your supply chain, of course, it does also in the long run reduce the risk, which creates that resilient supply chain that we all hope to have. So I'm going to jump topic into a different topic that I know you're also very passionate about, and that's about sector initiatives. I know that you're a huge supporter of industry collaboration, and in fact you have been quite vital for us when it came to being very leading in the founding of 2 sector initiatives. We have the Air Pro initiative, and then the one I'm always scared to say, is IAEG, a lot of vowels. So I would really be curious to hear a little bit more about it. And there, by the way, 2 of 14 sector initiatives, and we've been doing this for over 10 years. But in 2023, you've been, I would say co-founding in a way. Like you were very vital in those. Why are you so passionate about creating sector?
I mean, before Air France-KLM, I worked at PepsiCo, and in 2006 we were very early sort of working on this stuff. And we had this fundamental question like, do you leave it to the governance to set the pace? Or actually, if you think about sort of the larger corporations together, who's better positioned to have impact? And we concluded if some of the largest organizations in the world sort of bundle their energy, they probably faster have more funding available to make an impact than to wait for governance. And I think that influenced my career in that sense. And of course, you can go on your own, company by company. You're probably with a faster start because it takes a little bit of time to create a coalition. But I'm a deep believer, if you go together, I think you come a lot further. And over the long run, you're probably also faster. But there's a bit of investment to get started.
Yeah. Tell me, how did you get started? What have you done in those sector initiatives?
Yeah, what we did in 2023 is Air France-KLM as an airline was already doing supplier assessments. You can see that here, the blue box called civil aviation. But I was lucky enough to convince a couple of airlines to do this together. So together we teamed up with Delta Airlines and Virgin Atlantic. And the principle is that simple. The principle is, if a supplier has done one supplier assessment for one airline, it would be valid for the other airlines in this group. How simple can it be? So the suppliers were happy because they only had to do one supplier assessment. We were happy because we were going faster, and it delivered us great industry insights. What is the state of the overall industry? What are the industry themes? So again, it's not rocket science. In fact, we piggybacked, that's an English word, but we leveraged some of the other existing sector niches that are already in place, enabled by EcoVadis in this case. And maybe the other thing to highlight as well, which I think really helped us, a large part of our supply base is also what we call the OEMs. This is the Airbuses and the Boeings and the Rolls-Royces that make the plane engines. And they came to me in 23 and said as well, hey, we're thinking about this, what do you think? And I think collectively we concluded that aligning again behind the same standard would allow sort of this vertical supply chain of OEMs and airlines to work side by side together to accelerate that sustainability movement. I think because there's no time to lose and we had to improve fast. So that was quite exciting.
Tell me, and by the way, we're a little bit behind. Don't worry, we'll just take time away from your questions. You'll have to ask them quicker. But tell me a bit about the results that you achieved.
Yeah, very short. I mean, by now we have more than 1,300 supplier assessments with the airlines. And that's a 4x acceleration than doing it alone as Air France-KLM. In the OEM initiative, we have more than 5,500 suppliers. And our goal is probably to triple that in the next 2 years. So when I talk about going faster and going further, I think that's really sort of an exciting example.
5,500 validated assessments.
Yeah, so that is global, and I think that's, and maybe the last exciting thing to hear, we were very worried as Air France-KLM that it was centered around one of these global alliances. We Air France-KLM is part of SkyTeam, but now with American Airlines and Air Canada on board, we also have Star Alliance and Oneworld on board. So it's truly global alliance agnostic. Again, demonstrating this point that we didn't see it as a competitive game, but we saw it as we need to step it up, to drive further sustainability results.
Absolutely. I think it's a really compelling case, and you can see we do this in all industries and at almost all industries. If we're not doing it in yours, please come and speak to us about it. You creating synergies, you can achieve goals faster and you can scale quicker, and you take away the efforts of your sustainable procurement teams, but also especially of your suppliers, because they no longer have to do 100 different assessments for 100 different companies that they're selling to, but they do one assessment requested by the industry, and that just makes life much easier. All right, so there's one question I have to ask, because it's 2025, it's about a big buzzword, AI, we can all guess it. Can't leave a stage on a procurement summit without one question on AI, so let's hold it, make it super short so that we have time for the other stuff. But it's still important, so everyone's talking about AI, we are also heavily investing into it. Where do you see the biggest opportunities? In 1 minute.
Yeah, in 1 minute.
30 seconds.
I think, by the way, you're moderating great, so why about next time we do it about AI in a little bit longer? But the previous session was about AI as well, so we'll keep it short. But no, I mean, seriously, there's so many opportunities within procurement, and if I zoom into sustainable procurement as well, I think we're sitting up a mountain of data, and that's great on the one hand. On the other hand, it's really scary because sometimes you have so much data that's difficult to make sense of it. I am a huge believer about querying your data set. With AI, I think you get to much faster insights, much faster decision making. If you couple that with a sector initiative, you're not only getting a view on your own company but what's happening in industry. You can compare against other industries, and again, I think you'll be surprised if you ask AI, show me some key differences or some key trends. AI does it a lot faster than you can do it in Excel. And maybe another one is if you think about scope 3. So at the moment, I see a massive investment in AI, in carbon footprinting, in data collection. I think somebody else quoted recently, I think there's probably 80% efficiency in scope 3 data collection and carbon footprinting ahead of us. And again, with many companies committing to SBTi, with also near-term targets in 2030, which is coming fast now. They scratch their head like, oh my God, we committed to something, but we really don't know how to get there. I think that's where AI will be our best friend. But let's agree on another session on AI dedicated.
Nice.
And let's give a little bit of time for Q&A.
Indeed. I think this is the moment for you all. Let us know if you have any questions. Feel free to raise your hand. I know the internet is not as great for you to put one into the app. So instead, raise your hand if you have a question and feel free to ask it right away. Don't be shy. You can ask in German, I can translate. All right, so while you're thinking about questions, I can summarize today's session, and then we can still do a question after that. I think that when I look at the key takeaways of today, I'd say the first thing is make your sustainable procurement program measurable and visible, because otherwise you can't, show any ROI, anything else like that. Treat ROI more than just euros. You should also include resilience and risk and readiness. The next one would be, don't wait for regulation. I think it makes a lot of sense to lead the way through bold action and collaboration, especially when it comes to sector initiatives and these kind of things, really working together and trying to create impact there. And that's also how you can scale to impact faster. It's how you can reduce duplication and move entire industries, which is forward together, which is what we all want to do. So if you would like to visit us at our booth, or if you also want to speak to Jurriaan or myself or any of my colleagues who are there, we're at booth B64. It's slight opposite sideways of SAP. They have a big booth, so I think. So there's EcoVadis. We'll be there smiling and waiting for your questions, feedback, anything that you have, further discussions on today. And Jurriaan is going to be there until 4:15, so this is where you would have to still get him before he leaves. Thank you so much for being a sharp audience, for staying awake despite that coffee only starts in half an hour. And if you have any questions, you still have like 30 seconds to ask me. Yes.
Can you give some examples of how to incentivize? Can you give some examples of how to incentivize suppliers to get more sustainable?
I think explain with the segmentation why it matters to you. So why you are considering them to be in a high-risk category. If they're a smart supplier which knows what they're doing, they're probably agreeing with you. Secondly, don't take out a big stick. But say, hey, we're going to help you. There is education. You have your time. Take it step by step. Demonstrate to them at the same time also that you're serious about it. So if they don't take any action, that at some stage it's going to have an impact. So as an example, in our supplier assessment, we set a minimum level. If you're above the minimum level, you have your assessment valid for 3 years. If you're below, we want you to put the corrective action in place, which we'll help you with, but we come back in a year and measure you again. I think I've seen most suppliers reacting positive to that, and and also remind them that it's helping their top line. I think that's probably something what will do the job. But it's hard work.
And I think another thing to mention to your suppliers is that they're going to get really actionable insights and feedback, because it's all evidence and validated based, and there's a strong focus on improvement. They will receive exactly like a blueprint. What are the most important sustainability topics? And I have people come to our stand giving us that feedback, saying, we wanted to do more in sustainability, but we are a mid-sized company, we don't have a lot of expertise. But doing EcoVadis helped us understand what the top themes are and where our biggest strengths and our biggest weaknesses are. And we also learned all the things we were already doing that we didn't realize are actually part of sustainability, but also the things that we should improve on. So I think being able to tell someone that story and explain, you will be improving a lot and you will learn a lot of new things, and you get training through the academy, and also personalized feedback. That is something that can be very helpful. So, thank you so much. This concludes our session. We're on the spot.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Another question we'll take happily outside, offline.
All right.
Wow.
Thank you.
Such an inspiration. Thank you to Jurriaan and Sarah.